Hi, this is Miss Nicholas again. First of all, excuse the sound of this voice. I've got some of this sinusy crud going on, but if you'll bear with me for a little bit, I want to talk to you today about capillaries. First of all, before we get started, I want to remind you a little bit about the structure of these capillaries and what capillary beds are. Remember, you have arteries that bring blood away from the heart, A for artery, A for away. So bringing blood away from the heart, and they flow into smaller arterioles, which then flow into the smallest of the blood vessels, which are the capillaries. So in the capillary beds, that's the site of exchange, and we'll talk about the different things that are exchanged. But as we're looking at this, you'll see that things are changing colors. So these red vessels, your arteries and arterioles, are carrying oxygenated blood. So in the capillary beds, that oxygen is dropped off, CO2 is picked up. Now we have deoxygenated blood flowing into small little venules, which merge into larger veins, and then those larger veins are going to take that deoxygenated blood back into the heart. All right, so now we got a little bit of a preview. I want to talk to you some more about capillaries. All right, as I mentioned, the capillaries are very small blood vessels. In fact, almost all of them are microscopic. They have very, very thin walls that are typically only one cell thick. They also can be very, very small in that they only allow one erythrocyte to pass through at a time. So some of these are tiny little vessels that just allow that one cell to squeeze through, sort of like Fat Man Squeeze at Lookout Mountain. Now this is important that these these walls are very thin because they allow for things to be exchanged across the membranes. So we talked briefly when we first started about oxygen and carbon dioxide. So the exchange of gases across the capillary walls. We take that oxygenated blood out to body cells and drop off that oxygen so that we've got sufficient oxygen to make ATP. Well, in the process of doing that, we are going to be creating CO2, so that CO2 is going to escape from body cells across the capillary walls and into the bloodstream. So we're truly exchanging gases, dropping off that oxygen, picking up that CO2 when we're out in body tissues. Now just the opposite action is going to occur when we're in the lungs. We breathe oxygen in, so oxygen diffuses from the tiny little alveolar sacs that are going to be found in the lungs into the capillary beds. That CO2 diffuses from the blood into the alveolar sacs, and then we exhale it. We also, when we eat, of course, we're going to be breaking down our foods and getting it into those smallest little pieces known as nutrients. Those nutrients are carried in the bloodstream out to body tissues. Well, we've got to get it out of the blood and into tissues so they diffuse across those membranes. And the same thing with waste products, but we're going the opposite direction. With waste products created in body cells and body tissues, we want to get that into the bloodstream so that we can carry it to the appropriate cells to get rid of or to be excreted. And as you'll learn when we get into Unit 2 and we start talking about hormones, you'll see that those hormones also have to diffuse across cells in those endocrine glands, excuse me, and then be transported in the blood where they diffuse from the blood across the capillary beds to bind with cells that have receptors. And we'll talk more about that in the next unit. But the two forces that drive the movement of things across these membranes are hydrostatic and osmotic pressure. So I want to talk to you just a little bit about that to make sure that you understand exactly what we're talking about. All right, hydrostatic pressure is the pressure of water against a membrane, and osmotic pressure is the pressure of the solutes, how much stuff is in the water. So if you look at these two images we have here, A and B, all right, so all of this is our water, right? And you can see we've got an equal total volume in side A and side B. But if the little red dots, let's say the little red dots are sugar, okay? Which side has more sugar? Well, obviously side A has more sugar, right? So side A has higher osmotic pressure, okay, because it has more stuff dissolved in the water. All right, osmotic pressure means that there's more stuff. All right, hydrostatic pressure, the side that has the most water has the highest hydrostatic pressure. So side B has higher hydrostatic pressure. All right, now that we've got just the terminology, let's talk about how these things cause movement across the membrane. All right, so this is going to be our semi-permeable membrane, okay? So here we have a semi-permeable membrane. Now remember, your body cells are made of semi-permeable membranes, which means that some things get across and some things don't. Well, water gets across those membranes because of hydrostatic pressure and osmotic pressure. Hydrostatic pressure is going to push water from where there's more water to where there's less. So if you look at these two diagrams again, side B has higher hydrostatic pressure. So it's going to push water from side B to side A. So water is leaving B and going to A. Now side A has higher osmotic pressure. Osmotic pressure sucks. So it's going to suck water from where there is lower osmotic pressure to where there's higher osmotic pressure. So side A is sucking water from side B. So these two forces work together to move liquid, to move water across body cells. This is how things are moved across moved across those capillary beds. So if we go back up here and we're talking about sugar, all right, let's say, excuse me, that side A is a capillary bed, okay, and side B is your body tissue, wherever it is, doesn't matter. All right, so which side has more water right now? We've got a whole lot of sugar dissolved in our bloodstream, very little sugar in our body tissues, so there's more water here in body tissues, so water's going to move from body tissues into the bloodstream and vice versa, okay? If you have more water in your capillary beds than in your body tissues, then water is going to move out of the capillary beds into body tissues and cause edema. All right, so now let's talk about the different types of capillaries. We have continuous capillaries, which are the least leaky of all the capillaries, which means that fewer things leave across the capillary membranes. Okay, so you're going to find these in areas where you don't want a lot of movement of fluids and molecules from the blood into the surrounding tissues. So you've got these tight junctions. If you look, there's very little space here between these cells, so very little is going to leak out. So you find these in areas such as the skin and the muscles where you don't want a lot of fluids leaking out and causing edema. You also find these in the blood-brain barrier. The blood-brain barrier, with those really tight junctions between cells, prevents things from leaking from the blood into the brain. Of course, you know how important the brain is because of Unit 4 in 201, right? So you don't want all of these things being able to leak from the blood because, face it, we take a lot of things into our body we don't necessarily need getting into our brain. But some drugs and small molecules do leak across, and thank goodness oxygen does, right? All right, the next one we want to talk about are the fenestrated. Fenestra means window. Okay, so these capillary beds are going to be leaky, and you can see there are holes all in these capillaries. So the way to remember fenestrated, and it's a tongue twister, but fluid flows freely across the fenestrated capillaries. So you're going to find these in areas where you need a lot of absorption or filtration, such as the intestines, so that food can get into the bloodstream. From the intestines into the bloodstream and out to the body. You're going to find these in endocrine glands where your hormones can leave those cells, get into the capillary beds, and in the kidneys, of course, where the primary function of the kidneys is going to be to filter the blood. So we've got to be able to get fluids freely across those membranes. And then we have the most leaky of all, which are the sinusoid. Okay, so the sinusoid have very few tight junctions. You see there's lots of spaces between the cells. You have big old monster holes. All right, so this is going to allow for large molecules to cross from the bloodstream into the tissues. Also allows for macrophages to escape from the blood out into the tissues to clean up debris and infection. So you find these in areas such as the bone marrow, the liver, and the spleen. So you've got these big, large molecules that are going to be leaving the bloodstream and getting into tissues. All right. Okay, so let's talk now about two important parts of the capillary bed. We have the vascular shunt, which is a connection between the arteriole and the venule. It's a shortcut, just a quick run from the arteriole to the venule and get blood out somewhere else. The true capillaries are all that massive network of blood vessels that are between the arteriole and the venule and allows for all of that exchange to occur. Now let's look at an image that helps to explain this a little bit better. All right, so we've got our artery coming up and then our arteriole. Okay, this is a vascular shunt. So we have precapillary sphincters. Remember, a sphincter is something that closes off, so it's a muscle that contracts. When your precapillary sphincters close, the blood can't get out here into this area and this area, which is the true capillary bed. Now remember, it's in that true capillary bed where we have all the exchange. So this blood is being shunted quickly across there from the arteriole into the vein and then out to areas in the body. Take it somewhere else. Don't do all the exchange in that tissue. Now, up here in image A, we have all the precapillary sphincters open, so the blood goes everywhere and all out into that capillary bed where all those molecules, the oxygen, the nutrients, the hormones are all diffusing out into body tissues. Now, when might this happen? Let's think about an adrenaline rush. All right, say that you're walking through the woods and you come across that bear and you've got the fight or flight instinct that happens. So what happens? Your body is flooded with adrenaline. That adrenaline is going to cause precapillary sphincters to close in the body areas you don't need. Now, what areas do you not need to be functioning when you're trying to either run away from that bear or fight that bear? Well, you don't need your kidneys to be filtering urine. You don't need your digestive system to be working at top speed, right? Don't need to have to stop and pee or poop if you're going to fight a bear. All right, so we want to shut off those precapillary sphincters in that area so that oxygenated blood can be rushed out to other body areas. Now, where might we want those precapillary sphincters open? Of course, we want them open in our skeletal muscles, okay, so that oxygen can rush out into those body cells so that we can replenish those stores of ATP quickly. Our pupils are going to dilate. We're going to be rushing sugar out to body cells. So skeletal muscle needs lots and lots and lots of blood getting to it. Not so much so on the digestive system. Alrighty, so hopefully this wasn't too bad for you. Again, I apologize about the craziness of this crazy, scratchy sounding voice, but hopefully you got something out of this, and I'll talk to you again soon.